Om Jnanatimirandhasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guroho Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dina Bandho Jigatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gora Tvishe Namaha Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripasindhubhya cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Okay, I'll just met a few people. Okay, so how did everyone go into Bhagavad-Gita chapter 1? I said a long reading on purpose. I was just trying to see how deeply we could go in. How far did everyone get into the first chapter?
It was really good. I finished the first chapter yesterday.
Jai.
Yeah.
Okay. You finished as well, Mamataji?
Yes, Prabhuji. I finished first chapter, Prabhuji. It was really good.
Okay,
Nice.
Jai.
We read as well, Prabhuji. Thank you.
Okay, that's good then. I just wanted to see if it would be too long a reading for the first week. So I thought if I set that, I'll get a rough idea of how well we go with weekly readings. Okay, I think the general consensus then is that it's doable. So before we go ahead with touching chapter 1, I just wanted to continue, or rather finish what we were doing last week. Just the few final points. I figured out how breakout rooms work, so we will do a breakout room quickly. Let me just share my screen. Okay, so we were going over these topics, right? And I just want to touch upon not so much the content of these. I guess all of these lists and all you can check. I sent the slides into the WhatsApp group. I just want to go over a concept that I think might not have necessarily been conveyed fully when we were covering these. And I'm more just sort of touching upon it. I did mention it, but I want to touch upon it again because it'll come up again and again and again. We have 3 categories that we like to categorize things in our philosophy. They are Sambandha, Abhidheya, and Prayojana. And I just want to quickly touch upon it again because we didn't have a list for it last week, and it's important to get it because it's really recurring terminology. Who can tell me what Sambandha means? Who knows?
Relationship?
Yes, relationship. Very nice. So Sambandha means relationships. We always begin with Sambandha because Sambandha is telling us how everything around us is relating, right? And so here I've given an example of how Prabhupada has touched upon this in the introduction, right? So Sambandha is telling us how everything relates, what is the nature of everything, right? We're getting the starting point. After Sambandha, we normally have Abhidheya, but Prabhupada, he's done it in a slightly different order, which makes sense. So Prabhupada then comes to the third thing, Prayojana, right? What does Prayojana mean? Who can tell me what Prayojana means?
Is it in the goal, Prabhuji?
Yes, Prayojana means the goal, right? So we have the Sambandha, we have the way things are now. the way things are relating now. Then we have the prayojana. What is the way we want things to be relating at the end of whatever we're doing? What is the goal, right? What do we want our sambandha to be at the end of the Abhidheya, right? At the end of, I won't say what it is because I'll ask somebody to define Abhidheya later, right? What do we want it to be? We're here now. Where do we want to be? Where are our eyes pointing towards, right? So sambandha is where we are standing now, and prayojana is the direction that we are facing, if that makes sense, right? So prayojana is the goal, and sambandha is the current situation. And then we have Abhidheya, right? And who can tell me what Abhidheya means? It doesn't mean Krishna consciousness, although it is Krishna consciousness. But who can tell me what Abhidheya means?
Process, Prabhu.
Yes, it's the process. So if we have the sambandha, which is where we are standing, if we have the prayojana, which is where we are going to go, the Abhidheya is the means by which we get to the prayojana, right? If sambandha is where we are standing, if prayojana is where we are looking towards, Abhidheya is the pathway, the walkway there to our destination. So I just wanted to touch upon those three. They come up often, and it's a good thing to understand. Now, before we dive into the first chapter, and I guess this is rather related to the first chapter, Srila Prabhupada, he makes some very nice points regarding the qualification of who should study the Bhagavad-Gītā. And what he does is he gives the example of Arjuna, right? And he says Arjuna is setting the example, right, of what a student of Bhagavad-Gītā looks like. If you want to study the Bhagavad-Gītā, you want to be like Arjuna. And in what way should we be like Arjuna? Well, Srila Prabhupada, he gives three things, right? It's in the sentence immediately following the one that's being quoted here. And those three things are: one should be a devotee of the Lord, which hopefully all of us here are, right? That I don't think we need to struggle with too much. At the very least, we are aspiring to be a devotee, and in this case, it's good enough, right? So one should be a devotee of the Lord, because Arjuna was a devotee of the Lord, and he was the person who Krishna chose to reveal the Bhagavad-Gītā to, right? Or rather, we can say Krishna arranged the pastime so that it can be the perfect way for him to reveal the knowledge of Bhagavad-Gītā. The second point that we have from Arjuna is that he is a direct student of Krishna. Now, some of you might think, oh, well, pack up my bags and go home then, right? Because I'm not a direct student of Krishna, am I? Some of you might think, well, it's time to drop out of Bhakti-śāstrī. I'll never understand Bhagavad-Gītā because I'm not a direct student of Krishna. Can anyone guess? Can anyone try to guess why it said you should be a direct student of Krishna if, well, Krishna is not manifesting his pastimes right now?
The Bhagavad-Gītā has been passed down in the Cyclic succession. So we are under the same succession of Guru Parampara.
Yes. That's a very good response. So through the Guru Parampara, Srinivas Prabhu, I think you had your hand up, or was it Katyayani?
It's the same answer, Prabhuji. Vidhi Mataji already explained.
Oh, okay. Same answer? Yes. So that's correct, right? The spiritual master, the Guru, whoever it is, he is representing Krishna. So he is as good as Krishna. Krishna says in Srimad Bhagavatam very famously, Acharya Mam, the Acharya, I am the Acharya, right? Of course, that's not to say that the Guru is directly Krishna. We have to understand this in a qualified sense. I'll send very egotistically, I'll send an article I wrote on this for the newsletter where I talked about this, how Krishna has empowered the spiritual master in the WhatsApp group. But we should understand it's a complex relationship. But for the disciple, the Guru is practically Krishna. The Guru is the transparent via medium. So when one sees the Guru, one sees Krishna, right? Because the Guru has fully emptied himself out, right? The Guru is empowered by Krishna to represent Krishna. Srila Prabhupada gives a very wonderful example of the ambassador. when the ambassador visits a nation, the locals of that nation, they treat the ambassador as if he's the king of the nation he's representing, right? So in that same way, there's also many other ways to understand it, but we'll touch upon those when we get deeper into Guru Tattva in the second chapter. So in this way, we can understand. We all have the opportunity to be a direct student of Krishna if we understand this knowledge within the confines of the Guru Parampara. And then lastly, it says he is Krishna's intimate friend. Now, again, we might think, well, if the last one didn't disqualify me, this one definitely does. At least I thought that when I first read it, right? Because I'm not an intimate friend of Krishna, right? But Srila Prabhupada, he writes very nicely in the introduction, actually the solution to this concern. I know the introduction was last week's reading, but can anyone remember how Srila Prabhupada, he resolves this? That's all right, because it's not very directly mentioned. I wasn't really too confident that people would get that one, because it's a little bit not so explicit. But Srila Prabhupada actually says that these intimate relationships that we have with Krishna are inherent in the soul, right? They're sort of, how do we put it? They're hidden away, right? They're in a seed form, but they are present, right? And the moment one becomes a direct student of Krishna, either by meeting Krishna directly or the spiritual master, and the moment one acts as a devotee of the Lord, even if that relationship is very, very tiny, right? It's still there. It is awoken. So even if it's not fully there, even if we don't know, which Gopa we are, which Manjari we are, which Gopi we are, all of these high, esoteric things, we still have that intimate relationship starting to be awoken. And because of that, then we are also qualified then. So really, actually, all of these three are all summarized under being a direct student of Krishna. Because if one is under the shelter of a guru, if one is under the shelter of the teachings of Krishna, then one is a devotee of the Lord, and one is also Krishna's intimate friend. So coming to conclude that point, we will go on now to our activity. And the only reason why I'm continuing this activity is it's I think a really, really good one. It's one of the OBA questions actually, but it won't be the one I'll include in your assessment, or maybe it will be, who knows. Essentially, we're going to break out into breakout rooms, and we're going to go and discuss the preface. If everyone doesn't have the link, it's the classic link database.io. If everyone can visit that. So when we go on there, we'll break out into rooms. And what I would like is for each group to come up with, at the minimum, either one mood, one mission, and then one extra one. So 2 moods and 1 mission, or 2 missions and 1 mood that are found in the preface, okay? So Srila Prabhupada, in the preface, we can find his mood, and we can also find his purposes for writing the Bhagavad-Gītā, okay? So in the preface, if we can identify some moods and a mission, or some missions and a mood, that would be very good. So I'll break everyone up into breakout rooms, which I now have access to. How many people are on the call? 16, so that's 15. So if we break out into 4 groups of 12, what am I, not 4 groups, 4 groups of 3 is 12, 4 groups. Okay, we'll have, we've got somebody else joining, so that's now made 16. Okay, we'll do 4 groups of 4 then. I'll create 4 groups. Okay, I will open the rooms in a second. Okay. Are there any questions on what the question is? Yes, Jai Haribol Nandan Prabhu, indeed. Oh yes, Nandan Prabhu, just in case you don't know, so the activity we're doing is we're breaking out into breakout rooms, and then we're going to go through the preface together, and when we come back, we're going to compile. We should all try to identify at least 2 missions or 2 missions. Look, I'll simplify it. Find 2 missions and 2 moods in the preface, okay? I've simplified it by making it harder. 2 missions and 2 moods in the preface. And then when we come back, each group should share at least 1 mood or 1 mission, and we'll go through like that, right? That way, there'll be no chance that everyone's already said everything you've already said. Okay, we'll break out into rooms now. If you have any questions, just send out a message to me. Okay, see you all in, you have 6-7 minutes to do it. Let's say 7 minutes, okay. Okay, I will. Let me just. Okay, there we go. I've given sharing permissions in case anyone wants to share their notes. Okay, so I think first we'll start with. Oh, was somebody going to say something? No. Okay, first we'll start with Varun Prabhu's group. I don't know who the scribe was in that group, but if you can give us.
It's actually Rohan. He wanted to.
Okay.
Okay.
Srila Rohan Prabhu. Okay,
Yeah.
please share.
Okay.
Yeah, 1 mission or mood.
Yep. So we found a mood in the 3rd paragraph where it says that anyone who tries to understand Bhagavad-Gītā from a Mayavadi point of view will commit a great blunder. So it's just a mood of compassion from Srila Prabhupada where he wants to present Bhagavad-Gītā through the mood of devotion so that he can help all the students truly understand like Krishna.
Jai, nectar. Yeah, good point. And then, so that's the mood of compassion. Then next, let's have Vignaraj Prabhu's group. Who was the scribe who wants to speak from that group?
We didn't really have a scribe, but I wrote some stuff down anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, we came up with 3 moods. We put a lot of emphasis towards we felt like Prabhupada had a lot of compassion for people who were bewildered, and because and there was 2 paragraphs, and then the mission kind of laid off into the 3rd paragraph, and we thought the mission that Prabhupada wanted was to present the Gita as it is in order to guide the conditioned souls back to God, and I think that was something that was missing in the Bhagavad-Gītā before. So it was just like people were just writing the Bhagavad-Gītā just for the sake of it. But whereas now it's like it's so that people can be connected back to Krishna.
Jai, very nice. Did anyone else from the group wanted to say anything? Otherwise, I'll move on to another group. Okay, yes. Which group? Then I think we have Mrunal and Shivam, Mataji and Prabhu's group.
Yes, Prabhuji, we have come up with a couple of points. So you need 1 point for mood, Prabhuji?
Yeah, whichever you'd like, really. One from mood.
Yeah.
Or mission. We haven't heard a mission yet, have we? We've heard 2 moods. Let's hear a
Yes,
mission.
Prabhuji, it's a mission. Okay, so
Yes.
Prabhuji, with mission, we have come up with a couple of points where Prabhupada felt that Krishna consciousness is essential in the human society because that is the highest perfection of life. Because we all are part and parcel and conditioned souls in this material life. Prabhuji, that was the mission of Prabhupada. Yeah. Anything else from the group want to share? Anybody else from the group?
Just to the same point, it's instead of satisfying our own senses, we need to satisfy the sense of Lord. That's the main achievement to get the highest perfection in life.
Jai, very nice. Okay, and then anyone else wanted to share from the group?
Yeah.
Otherwise, then we will move on to Tarun Prabhu's group.
Yes, Prabhu.
Yeah.
One of is already captured. The other one, one of the mission was to present the Bhagavad-gītā in an authentic form, in as it is form.
Yeah, very nice. Okay. Did anyone else have any moods or missions that when mentioned that they wish to share?
Yes, Prabhuji, there was this one in second paragraph was very good, Prabhuji, when all the parents, mothers and fathers of the devotees would come and express gratitude to Prabhupada because he spread the Krishna consciousness movement in the entire world. But Prabhupada was so humble. He used to say, the original father is, Lord Krishna himself, and he told any credit he has, it belongs to his Guru Maharaj, spiritual master.
Humility.
Yeah. Humility, yeah.
There's a saying. You go.
That's it, Prabhuji. Yeah.
No, there's a saying in Bengal. It says that once I heard the Gauriya Vaishnavas speak about Radha and Krishna, and I thought, oh wow, this is a really, really sweet thing. I wish to become a devotee. And so they went along, and I decided I wish to hear, all of these sweet pastimes and kirtans and all. And then after practicing for a while, I heard them say Trinadapi Sunichena, and I thought, oh no, this is too difficult, and I left. So humility is really really important, and is also the hardest one to have. But yeah. Very nice. Okay, so I think that concludes that. I just think that's important to touch upon, so we can really get an understanding of Srila Prabhupada's approach. What is he trying to achieve when he's writing this Bhagavad-gītā as it is? And what is his mood while writing it? One line that I particularly like is the final line, I think, but it's definitely towards the end. It's the one where Srila Prabhupada says, if only one person can take this up, this whole effort will be a success. Of course, if we've heard of Srila Prabhupada's, pastimes in New York and all, and we can think of how much struggle Srila Prabhupada went through, and just for one person, right? But this is that great merciful mood of Srila Prabhupada. If only one person can take up Krishna consciousness, then it's all worth it. And one of the great, not paradoxes, but one of those wonderful tensions that we can find, and we find them all the time in spiritual life, is that Srila Prabhupada, by his mood of saying, I am happy with only one person, he fully qualifies himself to deliver so many people to Krishna consciousness. If one person has this attitude of, I only want a bajillion, I want this many, that many, they don't having the proper sense of mercy, right? But Srila Prabhupada, by just so simply being satisfied by giving this great gift of Krishna consciousness to one person, now he is fully qualified to give it to everyone, and give it to everyone he did, as we know. So that just concludes that stuff that I wanted to touch on from last week, because I didn't really want to skip over it. Are there any questions before we move on to now discussing the first chapter?
Can I share one point, Prabhuji?
Yes, for sure.
It is not directly coming from the preface, but I heard in one of the lectures that Prabhupada's main mood in writing the books is, even though Krishna is saying that in a different bhakti, different ladders of the devotional service, but Prabhupada is giving the bhakti is the highest process, and it is only the process you can achieve Krishna in every aspect, even though it is in the karma kanda or karma yoga or in a jnana yoga and in ashtanga yoga, but he is giving the conclusion before it comes to the part of bhakti. That is his compassion. That's one of the point I just heard, Prabhuji, so I just want to share you.
Yeah, Srila Prabhupada brings out, sometimes people will get annoyed at Prabhupada because Prabhupada will sometimes translate the word karma yoga as bhakti yoga. And they're like, no, wait a second, you can't do that. But actually it makes a lot of sense in context, as we'll touch upon as we study deeper in. In context, it is referring to bhakti yoga. And this is following from Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. As Nandan Prabhu very nicely called it, we have the bhakti burger, right? Where we have the first 6 sections about karma and the last 6 are about jnana. And this description is given. But Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he also gives another description in his commentary. And he says the reason why karma is first and jnana is last is because karma and jnana without bhakti are useless. And therefore, both of them have to touch bhakti. If bhakti was last, then one of them would not be touching bhakti, and then they would be without any point. So we can see there, actually, all of these methods are only valid if they have some bhakti in them. And they're most fully fulfilled when they are just purely bhakti. Very nice. Okay, I'll switch now the slideshow, the presentation to chapter 1, unless anyone has any other questions. I hope everyone enjoyed the chapter 1 reading. Often on book distribution, sometimes devotees will say when they're preaching or so, they'll say, oh, you can skip the first chapter and go to the second chapter. That's a common thing, right? They'll say, oh, it's just a bunch of lists of conch shells and all. But it's actually it's actually very, very deep, right? Often devotees will have this experience, but the first chapter is actually very, very deep. His Grace Madhavananda Prabhu, I don't know if any of you know of him, but he's a very, very senior disciple of His Holiness Srila Gaur Govinda Maharaj. And he's a very, very deep devotee, very rasik. He knows all of these shastras that I don't even know the name of, and he knows all of them like back to front, right? And if you ask him what his favorite chapter of the Bhagavad-Gītā is, he says the first chapter every time, right? So if such a rasik, elevated devotee like that is finding lots of nectar in there, there is some there, but yeah, sometimes it comes with deeper study, but hopefully we can find some of it as we go through it now. What's the time? Half. Okay, yeah. So before we begin, we'll just touch a little bit on the first chapter in general. So Srila Prabhupada, in the beginning of the 9th chapter of Bhagavad-Gītā, he gives an overview of the first few chapters. And this is the comment he makes for the first chapter of the Bhagavad-Gītā. Jasvanat Prabhu, would you like to read it out? Jasvant Prabhu, maybe? Did I mispronounce it?
Yes, Prabhu.
Yes.
The very beginning of Bhagavad-Gītā, the first chapter is more or less an introduction to the rest of the book.
Yes. So sorry, this is our third introduction now. We had an introduction to Bhakti-śāstrī, then we had an introduction to Bhagavad-Gītā, and now we're having the Bhagavad-Gītā's introduction to the Bhagavad-Gītā. But we're diving into the text now. Our acharyas have said this. They say that the first 27 shloks, they are an introduction to the Bhagavad-Gītā as it is. But actually, I would like to say that within the first 27 shloks, we can find a lot of the main themes. And actually, we can find the full conclusion of the Bhagavad-Gītā. We can find it all there. But still, it does act like that, right? We're hearing about the armies. We're hearing about the context. We're hearing all of these sort of things. So as we go along, this is the general theme. Now, I have an overview here. I'll send the slides into the group chat again, so don't like, sprain your wrist or something trying to jot down the whole overview. But, write down anything you want, but don't feel pressure to get all of these notes down. This is a general overview of the first chapter. The first chapter is a very straightforward structure. It's really two halves. The first half, as I said, the acharyas, they've said very clearly, the first 27 shlokas, they're an introduction, right? We have Dhritarashtra ask the question, which gets the whole Bhagavad-Gītā rolling. Duryodhana, he's speaking all of these words, right? He's giving his little speech. Then the conch shells blow, and then Arjuna has a gaze at all of the armies on the other side. Then we go on, and Arjuna, this is when the Bhagavad-Gītā really begins to begin. This is when Arjuna starts, having his breakdown. He has his existential crisis, which causes Krishna to speak the Bhagavad-Gītā. We'll touch more on this second half later on. Today, we will be focusing really on the first section of this first half here. At the top, I've mentioned the two different names our acharyas give for this chapter. Srila Prabhupada, following in the lotus footsteps of Srila Baladev Vidyabhushan, has called this chapter, what does he call this chapter? What is chapter 1 called?
Vishadi.
No, what does Prabhupada call it? What does he call
Observing
it?
the army.
Observing the armies.
on the battlefield of Kurukshetra.
Yes, observing the armies. And that's what Shainya Darshan means in Sanskrit. It can be roughly translated into observing the armies on the battlefield, right? So this is the title Baladev Vidyabhushan is given because, as we know, Srila Prabhupada, he really likes to follow in Baladev Vidyabhushan's footsteps. But Vishada Yoga is also a really interesting title. And I've mentioned this not just to give you extra details, but for a specific reason. each chapter of the Bhagavad-Gītā in Sridhar Swami's commentary is named after a yoga, right? And that's obvious in the later chapters when we're hearing about the elements, and that's when we're getting into philosophy, we're hearing about meditation and all. But sometimes people can be confused. How can we call this chapter a yoga, right? How can we call this a spiritual practice, right? And the title that is given to explain how this can be a yoga is that it is Vishada Yoga, right? A yoga of despair, a yoga of despondency, a yoga of breakdowns, if you will, right? This is, sometimes it's called Arjuna Vishada Yoga, just to drive in the point. This is Arjuna's breakdown, but it is a spiritually significant breakdown, right? So this is a form of yoga, this chapter. So it's not that we don't learn anything spiritual from it, right? Because what we learn is we learn the correct way that one can observe this material world and just become totally disillusioned by it and therefore be qualified to receive transcendental knowledge. This is the spiritual practice that is being shown here, right? Even though Arjuna, he's being illusioned by Yoga Maya, mind you, he's not a regular soul like me who always is conditioned and illusioned by Mahamaya. He's doing a pastime, but in his pastime, he's showing something significant, right? He's not just fooling around. Arjuna is showing very really the crisis which makes one qualified to hear this knowledge. He's showing the crisis, the breakdown of aspirations in material life. He's showing the breakdown in pains and disillusionment that we can have with this world that will bring someone to understand transcendental knowledge, right? So in this way, he is showing a yoga, right? Because all of these forms of yoga, they're ways in which we, learn to come closer to the Lord. And this is it. He's showing the despair, how we can use despair, despondency, sadness, depression, how all of these things can be utilized, right? In the spiritual quest, if you will. So there's something very deep. He's showing the utilization of the existential crisis in spiritual life. And therefore, we have the title Vishada Yoga, which again, Sridhar Swami uses. And I've seen some translators of Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur use this title, but I've also seen them use Shainya Darshan. So I don't know, I haven't seen the original Sanskrit. But at least in our Sampradaya, we have both. Yeah. So this is a general overview of the first chapter. Now we move on. So if anyone doesn't have the Bhagavad-Gītā with them, please get the Bhagavad-Gītā with you, just so you can follow along. There's, if you look at Christian evangelical churches, I find there's 3 different examples of approaches to this, right? You'll have the really relaxed churches. There's one church, Matt Chandler's church. And what he'll do is whenever he begins a sermon, he'll say, okay, guys, open up your Bible. If you don't have a Bible, there's a Bible in the seat underneath you. You can keep that. That's our gift to you. That's like his relaxed one. Then there's like the next level up, which is another preacher. And he'll say, take out your Bible. If you have your Bible, and I really hope you do, take it out and open up to the verse. And then you have the most extreme, the most conservative churches, and they'll say, open up your Bible, and you'll hear in the recordings like an ocean of just pages being turned. It picks up on the audio. So I'm going to assume we're going to be in the third case. Please have a Bhagavad-Gītā with you. If not, get onto Vedabase. Just don't get tempted to open up a Facebook tab, please. But yeah, hop onto Vedabase or something, because I'm not going to share the text on the screen, right? Okay, so we will open up with Dhritarashtra's question for Sanjaya. This is a very, very important shlok. I think all shloks are important in Bhagavad-Gītā, but there's 2 which I think are the most important in the first chapter. And this is one of them, right? So, Dhritarashtra uvacha, Dharmakshetre Kurukshetre Sammaveta Yuyutsavaha Mamaka Pandavaschaiva Kimmakurvata Sanjaya. Okay? Famous text. Who's got the Bhagavad-Gītā in front of them? Shivam Prabhu, would you like to read out Mrugank raised his hand. Next shlok, you can read it out, Mrugank. Shivam Prabhu, would you like to read out the English?
Dhritarashtra said, O Sanjaya, after my sons and the sons of Pandu assembled in the place of pilgrimage at Kurukshetra, desiring to fight, what did they do?
So here we find the opening, right? This is the opening pretense of the Bhagavad-Gītā. And it's not just thrown in there for fun. The Bhagavad-Gītā is very, very highly structured, and I will touch upon this point later on. So I'll touch upon this point later on as we dive into the meaning of this, because this first text establishes the mood of the Bhagavad-Gītā. It establishes what we are going to be studying. And how does it establish that? What word does Dhritarashtra use to describe his, or rather his son's army, right? What word does he use?
Mamakaha.
Mamakaha, right? So he's asking, what did Mamakaha, right? What does Srila Prabhupada render it as? My party do. And then what do the sons, Mamakaha Pandavash, right? Mamakaha Pandavaha, right? What does my army, and then what do the sons of Pandu do, right? Here we find already straight up the problem of Bhagavad-Gītā, mine and yours, your and mine, right? This is mine, this is yours, the false ego. Already it's right there, right at the beginning for all of us to see. Sometimes we'll find that even the bad guys of the story, if you will, they will reveal some very deep things. We can analyze their shlokas and we'll find that they're very profound. Our acharyas say that at these moments, Saraswati has appeared on their tongues and used their words to reveal something very true and profound. We'll find this throughout the first chapter. You might remember that at one point, Duryodhan, he says, look at my army. They are all ready to die for me, right? He says that. This was Saraswati appearing on Duryodhan's tongue, because they, not only were they all ready to die for him, they will all die for him, right? So here we can see some truth is put onto their tongues. And we find this with Dhritarashtra's case. Mamakaha Pandavaschaiva, right? Here he's showing us, right? What is the essential problem of the Bhagavad-Gītā, right? It is this false ego, mine and yours, your and mine, right? Here are my children. What are my children doing? And what are those Pandavas who I hate so much doing, right? So here we find it already. Mamakaha. So we find this theme, false identification, that desire to exploit. All of those things is already there, right there in the first text. And then Kim Makurvata Sanjaya, right? So some people might ask, right? When they read this, they'll say, well, Dhritarashtra is a bit of an idiot throughout the Mahabharata, right? As Srila Prabhupada says, he's not only blind materially, he's blind spiritually as well. But somebody might say, well, you don't need to be blind to know that it's a contradiction to say they're all assembled on the battlefield. And then he says, what do they do, right? That's a bit of a silly question, right? It's like saying, oh, my parents, they went to the ATM, and then what did they do, right? It's pretty obvious what they did. Or my parents are having dinner. What are they doing, you know? And often the acharyas come and they say, what a silly question somebody might ask. But the reason why he's asking, what did they do, is he's actually asking something deeper. And that deeper thing he's asking, Srila Prabhupada, he bases most of his purport around. Who can tell me, what is that deeper thing that he's asking?
Is it the significance of the place, Prabhu, Dharmakshetra?
The significance of the place ties into it, right? But he's not asking about the significance of the place. He's asking about the impact of the significance of the place.
So he's essentially hoping, because we understand from our introduction to the Mahabharata, is that the Pandavas were virtuous by nature and pious. And relative to that, his sons are not so, especially after the disrobing of Draupadi and the many attempts to kill the Pandavas were virtuous people. And so in that respect, he's hoping essentially that this Dharma Kshetra, this place of Dharma, this place of religion, will impact, because we know that the characteristics and nature of the land impacts what occurs on that land. So he's hoping by the parties who assemble there, especially the virtuous Pandavas, that their virtuosity and the impact of that Dharma land on the virtuosity would make them go, oh, actually, we don't want to kill people. Let's just walk away from this. Let's just give up our, rights to the throne. We'll just walk away and everyone will just go and renounce everything. He's hoping that's what's going to happen. And that's why it's like, what's happened next? Because he expects that will be the next step of the Pandavas.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly it. Dhritarashtra, he wants the fight to happen and he wants his sons to win, right? So he doesn't care whether they're assembled and, actually, I'm sure he'd be really annoyed at Sanjaya, like just not answering the question. Because Sanjaya, then he's explaining the glories of Krishna and all this philosophy. Dhritarashtra doesn't want to know that. Dhritarashtra wants to know who's winning, right? Who's going to win? Are they fighting? As Nandan Prabhu very nicely said, have my sons had a weird moment where they just decide to become very pious and they say, okay, let's organize peace, right? Have the Pandavas been overcome by piety and also done the same? Or have the Pandavas, with all of that pious influence, just completely slaughtered my sons? This is what he's wanting to know. And this is why he begins with Dharma-kshetri, Kurukshetra. What is the influence of this place? Has this place, which has been decided to be used as the battlefield, how has this place messed up my plans for being the king, right? Okay, so we'll touch a few things on why Kurukshetra is a sacred place, and then we'll go for our 5-minute break, and then we will return to discuss a few central themes. So the significance of Kurukshetra is really prominent throughout Shastra, right? It comes up all the time. It's not has anyone been to Kurukshetra? I've been to Kurukshetra in Mayapur, because Kurukshetra remanifests in Mayapur as well, but I haven't been to the Kurukshetra, the manifestation most people think of. Tarun Prabhu?
Yes, Prabhu, I've been to Kurukshetra.
Jai. So that is one glory of Kurukshetra, that Tarun Prabhu has visited there. he has graced it with his lotus feet. So that is we don't need the other glories now. Oh, whoops, Jai. Okay, so that's one glory, okay? But in Shastra, we'll find the Jabal Upanishad, which is a rather prominent Upanishad, right? It's not in the Maha Upanishads that are often listed, but it is one that's often commentated upon. So even in the Upanishads, we will find glorification of Kurukshetra. The Kurukshetra is a place for sacrifice to the Devatas by those who are like the Devas. It is the abode of Brahman for all living beings. So it's a sacred place by nature, right? Parashuram, he went there and he performed sacrifices there, right? So performing sacrifices there, obviously, right? It's being recognized. Not only is there the Shastric reference that it is a holy place of sacrifice, it is a place for sacrifice. It's not just some theoretical description. It is being used that way. Vasudev, the father of Vasudev, Krishna, he also went there and performed sacrifices. Krishna, and this is very important to us who are Krishna bhaktas, and this is a point that we'll touch upon in the next half. Krishna, who, as we know, Krishna promises, he tells all his gopis, oh, I'll return after he leaves Vrindavan, right? But he always thinks, if I return to Vrindavan, then all of my enemies, they'll know about Vrindavan, right? Everyone will know I can't go, because if I go, it'll endanger the Brijvasis. So what Krishna thinks is he thinks, well, you know what? Every once in a while, the Brijvasis, they go, right? And they perform sacrifices there. So I also, this is describing Krishna book. So I also will go there at the same time, coincidentally, and just bump into them, right? That's what I'll do. So Krishna goes, and if any of us know the pastime, all the gopis, they're disappointed because they held on to that sweet, sweet Vraj Krishna, right? Vrajanath Krishna, not Dwarkanath Krishna. So they were thinking, why? Krishna, where is your peacock feather gone? What is this ugly crown doing on your head, right? Krishna, where's your sweet dhoti? Why are you wearing this armor? Why are you riding a chariot and not a bullock cart? Like this, they were completely upset, right? They were completely disappointed. But anyways, that's a little side point. But we can find here, right? This is very special, right? And we'll touch upon this as we go deeper into the Bhagavad-Gītā. So this place clearly has a, how should we say, baggage for Krishna as well, right? Krishna has some direct pastimes here prior to this battle, right? So here we find more significance of Kurukshetra. And lastly, and this is a point that most people would find interesting. Bhakti-Vinod Thakur, we know, very rasic devotee, right? If you read his poetry, it's very full on, you know what I mean? Like the glories of Radha and Krishna's pastimes in Braj, stuff like this, right? But Bhakti-Vinod Thakur was once asked, if you could do bhajan in any dham, in any kshetra, where would you do your bhajan in? And people were expecting Radha Kund, or, you know, Govardhan, or Navadvip, or something like this, right? But who can guess? Who can guess what place Bhaktivinoda Thakur said? Who can guess?
Kurukshetra, Prabhu.
Kurukshetra, yes. Normally when I say that, people have no idea, but it's pretty obvious in this context. Bhaktivinoda Thakur said, if I could go to one place to do bhajan, I would do it in Kurukshetra, right? Very interesting. So it has lots of relevance, not just in general Vedic society, but also it's a very pious place in our line as well. The reason why Bhaktivinoda Thakur said Kurukshetra is because he's a servant of like the gopis, right? And the gopis were so heartbroken when they saw this Krishna, this King Krishna, because the only thing more heartbreaking than separation is disappointment. You know, they were expecting, we will see our beautiful Krishna again, and they didn't see their beautiful Krishna again, right? So their hearts were so broken. Bhaktivinoda Thakur said, this is the place where I can serve the gopis the best, right? So this is his very internal mood, right? But we can touch upon that maybe in a much later course, a little deeper. But that's just to show Kurukshetra has a lot of significance. It's not just some willy-nilly place, right? So this is why it is described as Dharma Kshetra. So then we find also in Srimad Bhagavatam, there's a description here of how Kurukshetra was created, because it was literally manifested, at least under King Kuru. King Kuru once, he was taking care of the fields, which would become Kurukshetra. And all the demigods were laughing at him, because normally this job is done by, you know, the Shudras and all, not by the Kshatriya, not like the king, right? And so Indradev, he once came down, at least this is the pastime I've heard. I haven't read it in Shastra, I've just heard it from some sadhus. And so Indradev, he came down one day and he was just laughing, you know, he was thinking, what a laughing stock, you know, and he was just mocking Kuru, you know, Kuru Maharaj, he was just saying, you know, what are you doing, you know, just running around like a laborer doing this and that. And Maharaj Kuru, he said, no, I want this place to become such a great dham, to be such a great kshetra. And Indra, he laughed even harder then. He thought, oh, look at this guy, you know, what an idiot, right? That's what Indra was doing. He was mocking him really brutally. And then all the demigods, at one point they said, you know, Indra, you're just being mean, you know, just stop. Like this is just cruel now. And Indra, he took it on board and he thought, actually, you know what, that's a good point. And he felt a little bad, right, for his mockery. And so he granted it to Kuru. He said, okay then, you know, with my benedictions for what I can give, anyone who dies in Kurukshetra, which will be named after you, anyone who dies here, they will attain Swarga, the heavenly planets, right? I can't say that they will go back home, back to Godhead, but I can say they will attain the heavenly planets, which is why all of the warriors in the Kurukshetra war, they all thought, okay, yeah, you know, we're going to the heavenly planets. It's pretty guaranteed, right? So that's where their pretense comes from. Yeah. So then, and then we'll conclude on this point and then go off on our break. So then that's why at the influence of Kurukshetra, there was some worry, right? And Srila Prabhupada, he talks about some analogy of grains and a field. And this he's taken from the commentaries of both Baladev Vidyabhushan and Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. They both have this. This is the full analogy that Srila Prabhupada is hinting towards. I've copied it out of the commentary. Would Sri Mataji like to read this out? And then we'll go on our break.
It is suggested that Kurukshetra was a place for growing the grains of Dharma in the form of pious Yudhishthira, who was the very incarnation of Dharma, along with his supporters. The field, a place for exerting oneself in the work of cultivating, was the place in which Krishna, the nourisher of Dharma, would encourage Yudhishthira. The field, a place for many projects like blocking irrigation dikes and watering, was a place where Krishna would assist Yudhishthira in many ways to establish the grains of Dharma. The same field is also a place for weeds to grow. The weeds, enemies of the grains in the form of Duryodhana and others, also grew here, but would be destroyed by Krishna.
Jai. So there it is, right? So the whole idea is this, in this field, right? This kshetra, in this field, right? Normally when you go out into a field, you farm it, right? So this field is being farmed. But it is not being farmed in order to produce grains, right? It is not Annakshetra, right? It is Dharmakshetra. This is the field where dharma will be harvested. And when we harvest dharma, we get rid of adharma. We get rid of those who are not following dharma. And so Krishna farming the Dharmakshetra, Krishna farming the field of dharma will cut down all of the weeds of the Kauravas, so that the wonderful plants of dharma like Yudhishthir and Arjuna and all can flourish. So this is a very hidden meaning. And this we can consider was not Dhritarashtra's intent, right? He was only concerned with the first part, the piety of Kurukshetra. But this is an example of Saraswati coming onto his tongue and also making this point, that this is Dharmakshetra. And we all know that his sons were adharma, and therefore they will be weeded out. So on that point, we will have our 5-minute break. Hopefully everyone can recharge a bit. And then we will return back to discuss our next point, which is Bhakta Vatsala. Okay, everyone enjoy your break, and I'll see you all in 5 minutes. Hare Krishna.